Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this talk. There's new value in old data. My name is Chuck Sobey, and I'm from a local company called ChannelScience, just up the road in Plano, Texas. We're very happy to have been invited to have this opportunity to give what I believe is a rather unusual kind of talk in a group that does unusual things, right? You're working with old hardware, trying to resurrect it, and love it. So I know we're all kindred spirits here with that. Our work is funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. So as taxpayers, thank you very much. And I'll tell you a bit about that process too. If you happen to have some ideas and you're looking for grant funding, I'll share some of my lessons learned with you on that. So we love vintage technology. That's why they call it Big Blue, right? IBM. And I wonder, in the hyperscale data centers now, if it still has the charm. Will there be people wanting to do what we're doing, digging back in this old technology? And I was just at the NVIDIA conference, GTC, and the CEO, Jensen Huang, was showing off their new Blackwell processors. And they look a little scary themselves, right? So the technology charm, I'm not quite sure. So we're familiar with refurbishing the hardware, but what about refurbishing the media itself? That's a different story because the media wears, it's fragile. There's backup, but you may be working with the backup. So I want to talk a bit about obsolete formats, especially regarding storage, because we're fundamentally working on a tape project. And tape is it's a very robust medium, but it's subject to a lot of damage, especially if it's mishandled, if it's put away poorly. As I've been investigating the area of extreme data recovery, people have given me all sorts of stories about things they've found in tape. They've found insects in tape. They found peanut butter in tape. You can imagine, they found a lot of things in tape. And there's some very dangerous things that happen, like this is delamination of the information from the backing. And over there you see it missing. Sticky shed syndrome. There's no refurbishing that. The data is gone. So we want to avoid having that happen in the first place. And people go through a lot of care to get tapes working. There's something called a sticky shed syndrome, where the binder starts to change its properties, and just unspooling the tape causes it to do things like this. And so a very common way to fix that is to bake the tapes first. And if you talk to the largest tape recovery companies, they have entire rooms where 100% of the tapes that come in get baked first, because they found that it's just so prevalent. And it is surprising how big these old tape archives are. It's been estimated that between the two largest oil companies in the Houston area, they've got 7 million of these old 9-track tapes with seismic data. That's 2 companies. There's a big business in storing old stuff, whether it's paper or tape, CDs, film. And it's, I've been in places that look like the scene in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they are literally stored underground in salt mines. For what? If you never look at it, what is the purpose of it? And so, is it really obsolete? We're seeing a bit of a resurgence with audio tape, believe it or not, just like we're seeing with vinyl records. I don't think we'll see a resurgence of, data tape, because the modern tapes are a whole lot better and more efficient. In fact, in a comparison, this 10.5-inch reel, half-inch thick tape, this is 2,400 feet of tape, 22.5 megabytes. Okay. If you look at a modern linear tape open, LTO tape, they're at generation 9 right now with a roadmap up to generation 14 and beyond. That cartridge has more tape in it, 3,396 feet, and it stores at least 18 terabytes. So nobody's pining, to go back and say, oh, I love the quality of the data on that. No, it's not like audio. So my point is that obsolete media doesn't mean obsolete data. There's irreproducible scientific data that's on these old tapes, and that's where the interest comes from, whether it's medical information, demographics, telemetry, seismic information. There's value in it. Why? If we haven't needed it for decades, why now? There was no money to move it from format A to format B before. What's different now? AI. That's what's different now. There's interest to look at the original data again, to refine models based on these rare data sets, to do new science on old data. These are from experiments that don't exist anymore, whether particle accelerators or things you can't do anymore, like nuclear testing. And, when everyone has AI, which everyone will, how do you differentiate yourself? Well, certainly a bigger model, but then the biggest model wins. The differentiator is the data and how you use it. And, a surprising thing is these large language models, are over 1 trillion parameters now. They're being trained on generated data. So the large language models now generate data that trains the large language models of the next generation. This, to me, just says that these unique data sets are going to continue to be more and more valuable for those training needs. In addition to those rare scientific experiments, of course, there's those rare performances, whether it's on audio tape or videotape. And the cost of recovering data on these tapes is not cheap. I've talked with the large data recovery companies, and they will do good prices if you've got 20,000 or 10,000 tapes to do, and some jobs are as large as 1 million tapes to do, and they can span 1, 2, 3 years to do the jobs, and they look for multiple machines, and they have to keep them running constantly to recover tapes of that size. They've even rejected jobs because they projected out that they were going to wear out the supply of heads before they finished the job. So there would be no more heads to finish the job. So they didn't even start the job. These are some of the challenges that we've got when we're dealing with a limited supply of vintage hardware. So what we're doing is trying to fix all of those problems. We're creating a modern, universal or multi-format, do no harm tape reader. And it has to be better than the original equipment because the tapes have deteriorated. So this is in my lab here in Plano, and this is a wonderful machine. It's called a Qualstar. It does these 9-track tapes, and it's a wonderful thing to see. You insert the tape in the front, and through blowers and a vacuum, it actually sucks the tape out and threads itself. And then you can see under the hood, I don't want to refurbish that. And so I tap in to the signal chain on each of the 9 tracks of data. And this is what the waveforms look like on those 9 tracks of data. They're ranged in this IBM format of 8 bits and 1 parity bit. That makes a byte. across the tape. Okay. Now, if the tape has some problems, that's what you see here. This is called shoe shining. And the tape drive stops, goes backwards, stops, goes forward, and it keeps trying to read it. And as it does that, it wears out the tape and the heads. And it couldn't find the data anyway. So we're trying not to do those things either. Great machine, but still not quite what we're after. So instead, what we've put together, and this is an older prototype, we've got even a more modern version of our device now, but we're trying to be in minimal contact with the tape. You know that the heads typically push into the tape and scrape along it. Well, we're using much more sensitive heads, modern heads, that generate much more signal. So we're able to back off from that a bit. Because we're using modern heads that are made by the millions, our replacements are plentiful. And they're not all that expensive either. Our read performance is better, and we're able to move faster than the original equipment. These tape drives ran at about 120 or 125 inches per second. That sets how long it takes you to read it and rewind it. So we try to run faster than that, at least 2 or 3 times that speed. And that also helps drive out the cost of the recovery by having it take physically less time. Our goal is to be as universal as possible on different formats. Now, we are a 1/2-inch native format, but what we're doing, and I'll show you some images of it, is we're scanning the tape and getting a magnetic capture of the magnetic patterns that are on the tape, regardless of what the format is. Regardless. So a high-resolution capture of the magnetic state of the tape. And from there, you use software, different software modules for the different formats to identify the tracks, the beginnings and endings, the detection and decoding, which I'll show you a bit about in a moment. So this idea came about because of SBIR funding, specifically for the Department of Energy. Twice a year, they put out these things called BAAs, or Broad Agency Announcements, where they put out some ideas. Here are things we're interested in. And they ask people to put proposals together for unique approaches. And this is the one that we responded to. And you'll notice that it's right in the heart of the pandemic. So I was looking for stuff to do, let me tell you. And I was darn grateful to have found this particular opportunity. So they, this is the funding document, and then this other one here is the topics. And there's, dozens and dozens of pages of different topics for the different sections of Department of Energy. And so the one that I went for was topic 5 from the Office of Defense Nuclear Non-Proliferation Research and Development. So this is all about nuclear non-proliferation, what this project is funded for. And that's one of the big things that DOE does. And if you look at it, there's a phase 1 award, and this is for de-risking the technology. You got to have a pretty crazy idea. If it's just incremental, if it's probably going to work, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for breakthroughs. They're looking for things that are like, I'm not sure that's going to work. And that's what they like to fund, to give people a chance to make those big home run hits. And then the phase 2 is 1.1 million, and that's to create the prototype. And we won 3 SBIR awards. We won 2 phase 1s and 1 phase 2. And you see what they're after is being able to get this legacy storage media, 9 tracks, digital audio tape, other formats. And what I applied for was the other, because my idea was, a little bit unusual even for those. So I was grateful that was accepted. So we are trying to unlock the value of these irreproducible data that's stored on deteriorating magnetic formats for AI and ML. My goal is to develop the best tape reader that's ever been built for these legacy formats. And the reason I think we can do that is because we have better heads than we've ever had, than the legacy formats had. Now, what we've built with the prototype is a scientific instrument run by scientists. And in order to commercialize that, we've got to make a product we can ship and other people can use. And that's what we're seeking additional funding to do. So a bit more specifically about the project for DOE and what the problem is. When you do a nuclear test, there are sensors all over. And that is looking at seismic data. That seismic data went two places back in the 60s and 70s. It went to paper and it went to tape. And the science was done on a small subset of the paper, the best looking paper ones, averaged and went over and over and over again. It was just too much data for the tools of the day to analyze. That's not the case anymore. And we see it trends throughout climate science and seismic data, demographics, medical records, telemetry, to go back to the original corpus and take it all in and generate new insights and refine the models and make them better. And in particular, on the seismic stuff, the nuclear testing stopped with the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1992. Legal testing stopped. We still know that there are rogue nations out there that are trying to test smaller nuclear weapons, maybe even to use on a battlefield. And we have a worldwide monitoring network that is looking for these things. And the thing about a smaller nuclear explosion is that it's easier to hide in regular Earth seismic activity or a chemical explosion from, an excavation site of a mine. But by looking back at the old data, especially some of the smaller weapons in the beginning, you're able to find the signature among all of the noise and make our modeling and our detection much more precise. And so there's databases out there. This one is from DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. And there's also the CTBTO, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization, where people put their nuclear test data out there so scientists around the world can analyze it and refine their models and do a better job of monitoring. So that's what this is feeding into and why nuclear non-proliferation comes through with legacy tape drives. Now, of course, beyond data tapes, there's audio tapes and videotapes that are at risk. And the Smithsonian is in a program to protect their own collection, as well as then establishing best practices for the industry. Last week, I was at the Smithsonian briefing this team on my technology. And the week before that, I was at the Library of Congress and had an amazing tour of their facility. And they have 92 miles of shelving underground holding tape and film. I got to see the original Gone with the Wind in their vaults. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see some of the posts of that. So the business I'm trying to create out of this is I don't want to recover the data. There's people that do that. I want to make the need to refurbish old drives obsolete. Instead of having to keep track of 12 different formats and 12 different machines, I want you to use one machine. And there's 12 different software modules that work that. So that's the vision. And I believe we'll be able to be faster, easier to use, and drive down the cost of recovery. So more stuff will be able to be recovered. And it's surprising how many different formats there are. One company that specializes in tape recoveries is down in Houston, Ovation Data Services, and they've got these series of images on their lab wall. And you see the different formats, you know, starting back in the 50s and 60s, it was pretty straightforward. And then what happened in the 90s is the birth of a consumer version of tape. You know, this is where the personal computer started to take off, and we realized, well, we need to back up this stuff. And then digital audio started to be a big deal. So keeping a big piece of IBM or Ampex iron up and running decades later, it's not easy, but those things were really built well and engineered well. This explosion of formats were small companies building things out of plastic, and they weren't commercial grade, you know, they were consumer grade. And so people talk about a digital dark ages from about 1990s to the early 2000s, where these devices are harder to find in working order than those big science fiction machines were. And our goal is to be able to take care of that path too. So what we're not doing is creating a new custom head for every one of these formats. I used to be a magnetic head designer at the biggest head company in the world back in the day. It's of course bankrupt now, but Applied Magnetics. And so people are searching online for Applied Magnetics heads to put back in these drives. That's fundamentally not what we're doing. We're using heads that are already being built for other purposes by the millions. And our big technical stretch was, well, how do you use those then for these other formats? Well, that's what we figured out. That's what we've patented. That's what we've prototyped. That's what we got funded for. Why am I in Plano? Just like many people, I worked at Texas Instruments. So after working at the head company, there were a lot of electronics companies that were making the signal path, the read channel for hard disk drives and tape drives, and Texas Instruments was one of those. So I moved in to be a read channel architect and marketing manager for the read channels. And that's where I have the understanding of the heads and the understanding of the signal processing that goes on after the signal is generated. And this is our first prototype board on this program. And I've also have a long history in data storage because of my days back at Applied Magnetics. I've been consulting through ChannelScience since 1996. And it's always been about extreme cases of data, either recovery or new technologies being applied to data storage or memory applications. And so we've got some papers about recovering unrecoverable data, and a refereed IEEE journal article on the state of the art of recovery for hard disk drives some years ago, but that's where it was. So we had some credibility with DOE to put this proposal together. So what I've mentioned to you is more sensitive modern heads we're using. We've developed our own custom electronics. We're now on our 4th generation of tape transport with a flexible tape path, high speed and minimal touch. We've got leading edge signal processing, which is really critical because if you do the best refurbishing job you could do on a 1970s tape drive, when you're done, you've got a 1970s tape drive. And the tape has deteriorated from that point. We need to do better than that. And that's why we need better signal. We're starting from that. And then better signal processing. I'll show you what this hardware looks like and what it presents in just a little bit. And then the idea is that each one of these will have a separate software module, each different format. So this is the current state of our prototype. This is what it looks like. It happens to have, these are 1-inch wide tapes. We were doing a little experiment that I'll tell you about, but that's what that is. And I was really pleased with our team. All the time I'm pleased with our team, but this one in particular, for this example, they went in and 3D printed 1-inch wide rollers, because we're 1/2 inch typically, and redid the tape path so we could do this pilot experiment to demonstrate that we could read this type of tape. So I keep mentioning that we're better signal to noise ratio, better resolution. This is an easy comparison of that. These are two frequencies on the tape. So this is the signal that you get back from the amplifier from the tape. So this is a low frequency and this is a high frequency. High frequencies mean that the magnets are closer together, so their fields overlap, so they decrease in amplitude because some of the positive is overlapping with some of the negative. This is on a Qualstar drive in my lab, an old vintage drive. This is the same tape on our system. You notice the difference in the amplitude. The ratio of those is called the resolution. This one had a 33% resolution, ours had a 54% resolution. This is because we are better able to resolve the magnetic fields on the tape than the original equipment. And we have a much more sophisticated signal path than the original equipment, which just, not to get in the weeds, but did peak detection, and that was it. So to demonstrate that we could get all the way from waveforms to data, we wrote known data to the tape, read it back in, put it through our process, and as you can see, this is what we wrote, and this is what we detected. Same data. This is the state of our prototype right now. We're dropping 64 magnetic transducers on a ½ inch of tape. And this is the signal that's coming out of all 64 of those. So that's one pass. When you take that data and aggregate it and try to make some sense of it, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that data from a 9-track tape, and you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tracks, and you can see the inter-track gap between them, right? So what can you do with this? Well, for one thing, unprecedented verification of erasure. There's all kinds of stories out there of people sending hard drives or tapes to the landfill, and then some researcher comes and gets them and finds, oh, there's social security numbers on here. So with this, you can definitely guarantee that there's nothing readable on it. If we really wanted to get clever, we could consider going into the guard band here, the intertrack gap, and see, was it written over? Was there a snippet of the old data back there? Can we get it? And to show you the nature of how precise our scanning is, if you've ever looked at a magnetic force microscope, this is similar to that image. So we're actually seeing the individual magnets, the individual transitions on the tracks, on that same 9-track data. Now, what can you do with this? Unprecedented forensic analysis, right? You can understand that we could see if something is in the guard band, we could pick it up. But also, if you have a lot of tapes that are deteriorating and maybe you don't have the right equipment for it, you don't have the format, a decoder, what can be done is the tapes can be scanned on our system, and you then freeze the magnetic state of the medium. And then you don't have to worry about the time, because now it's in your other storage system, and you can look at it later with this very, very high resolution image. So this could be what's referred to as a preservation master, or a preservation, or a digital surrogate, or digital twin. And I'm hoping that something like this might catch on. So I mentioned we've got the do no harm idea, right? Which is minimal contact or no contact. And the single most sensitive parameter in the magnetic storage equation is the spacing from the magnetic source to the sensor, the magnetic sensor. It drops off tremendously quickly. So that's why you need that intimate contact. However, these are very much more sensitive heads, decades more sensitive heads. And so what I'm showing you here is a series of in contact and then on the same tape, just out of contact. What we do is we shine a laser on the tape, and when the heads come in contact with the tape deforms, and the laser beam then is reflected in a different location. So we know the instant we're not touching anymore because the laser goes back. And that's the point that we're at there. And we're still able to get signal. Now, the signal's not as high fidelity as in contact. There's a lot of other issues with it, but signal nonetheless. So we've had a lot of support from DOE with various programs they have to try to support small businesses. And one of the things they do is make us go out there and talk to actual customers. And we had over 120 interviews with customers during the early phases of the project, and had a lot of great comments from them, encouraging comments. And so one of those potential customer visits, should I say, was with the Carnegie Institution for Science outside of Washington. And as I was going through a tour of their facility, we walked past this particular room. And it's completely shielded, and they wanted to show me what was in the room. This is what's in the room. Okay, these are the only 2 of these tape drives ever been built. And they have them. Totally unique. I mean, you can see the old-fashioned stuff there, right? And the patch cards. So the walls are filled with these 1-inch wide tapes. And these machines were designed for measuring seismic or recording seismic data, analog seismic data. And the idea was the tape would move so slowly that it would take an entire month to run through the tape. So every tape there is a month of seismic data from various locations around the world. There's earthquakes on there, all sorts of things. And so our goal was to say, hey, can you loan us a tape? And we'll see if we can get any signal from it on our system. Well, you know the answer, right? Of course I can get signal out of it. So this is some of the tracks that we were able to get. This particular, see how these are all the same? That's because we're dropping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sensors on the same track. That is the timing information. They mark sub-seconds. Questions?
Yeah, so that's really an analog recording.
It's an analog recording.
Just like an audio tape.
Yes, just like. And this down here is a calibration signal for the seismic sensors. So we were very happy to be able to show that. Now, thank you for that question about analog. So when we saw that, hey, we really can read these things, well, what are some of the other bounds? What else can we do? So we went on eBay and got a 1/4-inch audio tape. Don't know anything about it, how it was recorded, what's going on. We put it on our machine, and here's what it sounds like. What I'm playing for you is this snippet right there of the tape.
Sweet symbols in the moonlight, do you mean that I will fall in love perchance?
So no processing.
It's romance. It's New York. It's spring. It's a beautiful time of year. One beautiful.
I hope that stops soon. There it goes. So that was this, and then we ran the tape backwards, so that would be the same thing backwards. This is the same piece backwards, same piece backwards. So we're just running back and forth that piece of tape. And you can see that we've landed 1, 2, 3 at least sensors on that. On another track, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sensors on a track. That's why they look so similar. We are working with a sound engineer now, and he's creating a test tape for us so that we can actually have known conditions and someone who has both a subjective and an objective interpretation. Because I don't know if the anomalies we heard there were from the original source or from our equipment. We need to find that out. Yes, sir.
A couple questions.
Sure.
When you're capturing that, what's the depth that you're getting and frequency that you're getting?
So our capture system, our A to D converters are 12-bit. So if we did approach audio, we could replace that. This happens to be the system, and 12-bit is way more than we need for these guys. So that's one area. But there's also ways to trade off the sampling and the resolution. And we're sampling, over a megasample a second.
And when you were doing that tape, how fast were you moving the tape?
So we were moving at about 2 meters. And so we had to slow everything down. So your question about frequency response is we can play with that because so to get a bit into the weeds with magnetics, because I can't help myself, there's the old heads that you see on all these old drives, they used inductive heads. And inductive heads were a ring with a coil wrapped around it, just like you always see. And so what happens is when the magnet goes past, that generates a field that generates a voltage at the coil. Okay? The faster it goes by, the bigger the voltage. We don't do that. Those are old heads, old-fashioned heads. Now, everybody in data is using magnetoresistive heads. And what magnetoresistive heads do is they're a special kind of metal that's biased, and they're active, so there's current flowing through it. And when there's a magnetic field, you bias it so that the vector of the magnetization is at a 45-degree angle. And when a magnetic field goes past it that's pushing up, it'll rotate that vector up. And when the opposite polarity goes, it'll rotate it down. So this vector is swinging up and down based on the pattern that's on the medium. Not how fast it goes, just the amount of signal strength that's there. And as that vector goes up and down, it changes the resistance of the stripe. That's why it's called magnetoresistance. And it's that resistance change that we're sensing. And that's what you see here. These are resistance changes. That's what it's mapping out at.
So, if I may, what
Yeah.
you're saying is that you're just using natural magnetism, essentially, as opposed to running unneeded voltage-wise. Is that correct? Is that roughly what you're saying?
I'm saying that we're not using inductive heads, which means we're not using the flux. We don't care how fast it goes past. We could drag it, a fraction of an inch a minute and still get a signal out of it. Or we could go past 1,000 inches a second and get the signal out of it. It's a very powerful feature of our system. Oops, not that. Okay, so the big deal, right, would be video. Now, we're not funded to do this stuff. We're funded to do the data. I want to be funded to do the video because it's really hard. And it's going to be bigger, I think. So here's a VHS tape. I went into my closet and found a tape that I probably recorded in the 90s off the air. And it was sitting in the closet for all these years. And we cut out a piece and put it on our system. Now, the VHS, what happens is there's 2 linear audio tracks at the top of the tape. And there's a control track at the bottom. And then the heads are rotary. So they're actually spinning as the tape goes past. And they write these kind of angled sections. And I knew we couldn't piece all of this stuff together in the time we had, but I wanted to see if we can grab the audio tracks.
Lord Vader, what about laying the rookie? This is never again. That was never a condition of our agreement. No one getting hands to this party. Lord Vader.
Sorry, I don't know how to stop that. Let's just say that stopped it. So some encouraging things that I'm seeing is, you see how this little progression of this, I think we're seeing the diagonal, right? So it's going to take a lot of effort to put this together for video, but I see no reason that we can't apply it to audio, to video, and to data, and to analog instrumentation. We have tested all of those.
Lord Vader,
Okay. So as we're looking for other opportunities, a talk earlier today was about non-US hardware. We talked about British hardware, Australian hardware, Soviet hardware, Japanese hardware. And it turns out that, the Soviet bloc was sort of making, they didn't want to buy IBM stuff, right? So they sort of made their own versions of it that were similar but not the same. And they did a lot of nuclear testing. And that's their nuclear test data in Kazakhstan. And there's a diplomacy thing here as well. The Department of State is interested in this stuff because they say, hey, we can help you with recovering this stuff and then put it out to the community and everybody benefits. And so that was another odd connection with this. And so we're trying to see if there's a way we can participate in this type of recovery in places like Kazakhstan. Because refurbishing a drive and sending it there, it's probably not going to work when it gets there. And there's not necessarily the same structure that says, yeah, we'll fund that locally. But being able to create a system like ours that could be shipped and sent and used easily, there's real possibility there. So what does this mean for you guys? And maybe if you've got a collection, think about what it would take to run your software 100 years from now. How can you, document that, create that, and make a plan? Because the things I'm learning about these old formats and what's important for us to know and leaving those breadcrumbs, I would like to infuse that in modern storage technology so that 50 years from now, if people need to do this, there's some possibilities for it. Because the technology is a lot more complex now and a lot more esoteric and a lot more private. So what would it take to run your hardware 100 years from now? Can you plant those seeds? Can you make it clear? And, the name of this is New Value in Old Data. Is there new value in your old data? Do you have some esoteric programming language that there's complete examples? Well, this is one of the things large language models are great at, right? Is learning how to program in these languages. So could you then offer that as a capability? Because you've got this whole set of working programs. Do you have recorded gameplay of vintage games? Are people interested in that? Do they want to know what it really felt like to do it? Would you then emulate that? As I've been looking at these rare data sets, I think the question has come up, what is the most unusual data set that somebody's been interested in? And, for me, it was, they were looking at like 1960s Porsche telemetry data from race cars. And it's like, what are you going to do with that? All of our technology is better than that. We're not going to learn about braking or steering or engines from that. But it was a game manufacturer, and they wanted to give you an authentic feel of what it was like to race in a 1960s Porsche or Ferrari. So do we want to know what it was like to play, your vintage Mario Brothers? Maybe. Maybe this is the right group. This is the right place to ask the question, though. What are the statistics that you've been able to collect? Is that of value? What are the demographics of the user? Is that of value? So I ask you to think about that. Is there new value in your old data? Because wherever I've looked, there's been value in the data. And so, as I mentioned, we can take some of these ideas and use them in modern technology as well. And we do that with some humility because we don't know what the future will hold. We don't know what the future will be capable of. We don't know what it will value. I mean, you think about a lock of hair, you think about a bone, and then you think about DNA analysis. Totally different. What is the DNA analysis that we don't know yet? So we need that humility to say, this is the best we can do, but the next generation will probably do better. And I am really touched by the way archaeologists live that. They will leave typically a portion of a dig site unexcavated because they know the future is going to have better tools and better methods, and they want to leave it in a state for them. And I think that's a good reason for us. Now, unfortunately, our magnetic data is deteriorating. So we do have to have some kind of intervention for that. And that's why I proposed the preservation master image. So give you a little look down the future, because I work in, that's typically where I work, is in the future of storage rather than the past of storage. And so some of the things people are working on beyond tape, there's a company called Cerabyte, and they're actually going old school and using laser inscription on ceramics and trying to find a way to make that fast. Microsoft, and all of the big cloud vendors, they're trying to find other ways and long-term storage. So they're actually using glass. This is Project Silica, and these are all little forms of glass where they do holographic storage on them. And then another big push is the entire DNA Data Storage Alliance, where companies are experimenting with storing data on DNA. And the benefit of that is it's always relevant as long as humans are here. So there's always going to be interest in DNA until the machines take over. Then it'll be tape, right? So we're hedging our bets. And there's more tape made now than ever. There's more tape used now. All that stuff that's in the cloud, where do they back it up to? A lot of tape. So I mentioned I look at the future of storage. I'm the general chair of the world's largest storage and memory conference. It used to be called Flash Memory Summit. Now it's just called FMS, the Future of Memory and Storage. We have our 17th annual event in Silicon Valley on August 6th through 8th. So if you're interested in storage, it's a great show to attend. You usually get about 5,000-6,000 people there, 100 plus exhibitors, all talking about the latest in storage and memory. So we're hoping for further funding. We're hoping for first customers that are willing to pay in advance to get access to the early prototypes. We might be able to provide access to rare data sets and have that as a business. Another thing that's particularly intriguing is the idea of sovereign AI. And that's with large language models. We're seeing every country wants to have its own large language model that reflects its culture, its language, its laws that can be queried by its people. And so that's just going to continue. And what are you going to train that on? Your local data. So hopefully more and more people will need this. So I definitely want to take some questions, but I also wanted to let you guys know about the grant process in case you wanted to know that. So let me just field a question now. And
are you familiar with the Ranger photo tapes recovery that was done by a semi-amateur group of NASA engineers back in, I think it was like late 90s, early 2000s?
In a McDonald's, right?
What?
In an old McDonald's.
I think so. But
I've heard a lot of NASA recovery stories, but I don't think I've heard about the old McDonald's. So what was that?
well, the photographs from the moon probes, when they were first sent back, the pictures you saw were pictures off a CRT with a film camera that was as received over the air. Needless to say, that wasn't the best resolution available. And what they did is, it was a dual path. When they received the signal, they displayed the picture and they wrote it to the magnetic tape. Now the tape, the machines that they used were unique for that. And 20 years later, the guy realized is that they've surplused all the machines that can read that tape. So he, him and his buddies arranged to recover those from surplus and make one last pass through those tapes to recover the data. because they knew they weren't going to have a second chance.
And we're thankful that people do that,
Yeah.
right? It's like all the stuff you guys do.
But that gets back to your comment about, yeah, you can do that, but it's not the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you've done a presentation to NASA, or have they approached you?
I haven't had a good NASA contact yet.
Okay. But I'm sure they have tons of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's part of what I'm trying to do is get the word out. And that's why I was at Library of Congress. That's why I was at Smithsonian. So now I'm on their radar screen.
Excuse me, are you looking for sources of private funding as well, maybe like angel investors and that sort of thing?
So our funding has been non-dilutive so far. We have a total of 1.6 million that's been put in. And I'm not sure. My preferred funder would be a customer that wants to buy them and would be willing to spend a premium up front to get access to the first ones and guide us on what the features are. Do they want it to stand vertically, or do they want it to lie down this way? Do they want it in a tray? Do they want it on wheels? Do they want it to stand up? What buttons need to be on there? How does it intersect with their workflow? So that's what I'm looking for. When there's investors, they want a return on that investment. I'm not sure, how quickly that investment will be able to be returned. If you're a customer that's going to make money off of the product, then I know they're going to get their return. And that's a little easier for me to manage than the private investors.
Miracles happen with, people going out for that outside investment. Like you've heard of CRISPR-Cas maybe. That, I'm a biologist.
Mm-hmm.
That system is really, for biologists, is really nothing major or remarkable or anything, but you hear it in the news all the time. All kinds of people are investing in it because they're hearing about it. And, I think to grow something like this, you need to, really get out among the public too, as well as, these government agencies.
Right. Well, I'm here for the public. Yes, sir.
So to the latest point, your presentation, very excellent, by the way, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. It seems to be geared towards a capital raise, or, finding investors, finding customers. But I believe that most of us here are hobbyists, self-funded, and I think the most relevant thing for us is to look at how we can, recover our data.
Right.
And a lot of the things ring true here because I've actually provided that service at BCFs that I go to for free at my table. What I don't have is a head anywhere near as sophisticated as yours, because I am using heads from the original equipment, even though I've developed a little bit of my own circuitry to read that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your head or parts of your components might become affordable to hobbyists like us, or if that's even within your scope.
I guess I don't see, that business of making replacement heads. One thought that I had was people have these large machines and then they can't get a replacement head. Would we be able to make our heads replace that one? And, I think the short answer is yes, but I think that that's a one-off for that specific model. And all of our money, the investment that it would take to do that would be better spent doing a more universal version. And that's the business side of it.
So how much does your head cost right now? Did you bring one?
No, I didn't bring the head.
If someone were to buy just your head, the one that you developed with the, what you call it, the magnetic resistance.
Yeah, the MR heads.
What is the cost for that, or are they even available?
Well, we're not selling those pieces, so I wouldn't have a number for you. The heads are, for our cost, in the hundreds of dollars. It's not thousands of dollars.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
Of course, this being about, the retro computing convention, has there been any discussion about if the technology could be adapted to floppy disks?
Yes, however, we're fundamentally doing tape transport. the idea would be you need to do the rotating disk media. The same principles would apply though, but we're not doing a transport for the floppy. I see the market for tape is much larger. Could we branch off from that once the business is up and running? Yeah, but in the short term, we need to focus, or we won't make it.
Just for my own curiosity, you said you have, you move the head away until you're no longer in contact. Do you have an idea how big a gap you have there when you do that? And would you say it's more or less than a hard disk drive head above the platter?
So I've worked in hard disk drive a long time and have a ton of respect for what goes on inside hard disk drive. It's phenomenal. And so the hard disk drive, their non-contact is so close to contact that they're definitely much closer than we are. We are using mechanical stages, with very fine, precise mechanical stages, but we're just rotating a barrel. And so that little twitch of the barrel is definitely going to be bigger than that spacing that's in the hard disk drive that's done with an air-bearing design. And no, we didn't measure, we didn't measure it because we don't have that type of measuring equipment.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
What was your original impetus for getting into the tape market originally? Was it kind of you fell into that career, or what was your original interest that got you into the first job there?
So I was in hard disk drive, and that was where I started. I was in the graduate program at UC Santa Barbara, and Applied Magnetics is in Santa Barbara. It's in Goleta, actually, and so that was one of the big employers in town, and so that's why I got into it in the first place. And the tape, although I worked for a startup that did laser optical tape about 20 years ago, if you can believe that one, this is the first tape project that I've done. I've done optical and solid state and hard disk drive, but this is the first magnetic tape project. And it's been fascinating. Other questions?
Because you can't go 5 minutes today without mentioning AI.
Mm-hmm.
Like in your audio example, I heard that there was still like wow and flutter.
Right.
What was it called that? Do you have kind of a software stack that you're developing hand in hand that would remove wow and flutter and kind of do those post-processing tasks? Or is it purely a hardware type R&D effort?
No, it's hardware and software. But the audio, that's not something DOE was interested in. That was just a side test.
Sure.
Bought it on eBay and played it. So I don't know if that wow and flutter is recorded in or whether it's our fault. But like I said, we're doing a controlled experiment with a sound engineer, and we're going to find that out. And there are wonderful processings that you can do. You may be familiar with the plangent process, and that can take all of that out. All right, so I wanted to just, if you get a chance and you want to explore grants for your own, turn your hobby into a business, let's say. These are some really good sources of information about the SBIR program. And, my lessons learned on that, start early in the process. It's rather complicated. And I would suggest even doing just a test one. Just pick anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if you don't know about it. And go through the steps, because there are many registrations you have to do. You got to sign up with this website and that website. Get things in order, and that will help you do it. And if you actually found one that was reasonable, close, do the full application and then hear what the reviewers have to say, because they'll give you all that information, and it'll really help you with the next one. I did that. I didn't win my first one, but boy, did I learn a lot, and ended up winning the second one. And you want to follow every instruction, no matter how weird it seems, because you will get administratively rejected, right? If it's too long, if it doesn't do the right thing, if you didn't have this piece attached, they're getting hundreds of these, right? And so which ones are they going to spend the time reviewing? The ones that follow the rules, okay? That's the way it's going to go. And DOE in particular has some tremendous training that they offer. It's free. And for even first-time proposers, they will help you with the process. And it's good help. And then they'll give you training. It's almost like getting an MBA in business. They go through Stanford's lean startup method, and they call it I-Core or now phase shift. And they assign you advisors, there's homework, there's requirements, there's resources, and it's really helpful if you haven't, like me, hadn't really done a business before. They've really helped me get things solidified. So it's the SBIR is a great government program. And I want to remind you, they're looking for risky technology, stuff that maybe won't work, because they're trying to get those big breakthroughs, not just incremental, because that's what companies are supposed to do, incrementally improve things. This is for breakthroughs. So, thank you for your questions, and good luck. Thank you.